Good evening and welcome to the Council Budget Meeting for Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. Please rise for the playing of the National Anthem and a moment of reflection. I will now look to Councillor McPherson for the land acknowledgement, please.
The land on which Council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Attawandaronk, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many Indigenous peoples made up of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement should remind us of our responsibility to ensure the Dish, the territories on which we live and work, is never emptied, and that we take care of the land and its inhabitants in a way that ensures its future sustainability.
Thank you. And this evening I have a very brief chair's report. I just wanted to, first of all, say that we did have our town hall meeting that was very well attended, and there was lots of people that participated in that, and I'd like to thank staff and the mayor for holding that for us, and really happy to be able to reach out to the public to hear their comments and them get their ideas back to us. And we also had a town hall meeting for the budget at the Kiwanis Aquatic Center, and it was great to have that as well. And again, thank you to staff for coming and joining and answering the questions that we had from the general public. So thank you for all involved, and I'll just look to the Deputy Clerk for a reminder on the amendment process.
Thank you, Chair Dodge. Just a quick note for the councillors. Online this evening, we have councillors Lindell, Townsend, Stevens, and Mako. And in the council chambers, we have councillors McPherson, Phillips, Ratzlaff, and Chair Dodge, and Councillor Miller as well. In terms of the next steps in the budget process after this evening, on November the 19th, that's the meeting where amendments to the mayor's budget will be considered. If a councillor does have amendments to the mayor's budget, they are required to be submitted to the clerk's office by 4 p.m. next Wednesday. And then the agenda for that meeting will then be published next Friday, which is November the 14th.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Phillips, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McPherson. All in favor? Can you see if anybody's voted online or not? Okay, so that's carried. So adoption of the minutes, there are none, so we don't have to do that. Oh, sorry. The minutes from the meeting of October 15th will be brought to the meeting on November 19th for approval. And are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none. There are no consent or discussion reports, so we don't have to make any motions for that. And then we'll move right into presentations, and that's 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and that's Office of the Mayor Administration, Mayor's presentation of the 2026 Readoption Capital Budget, Water and Wastewater Budget, and the associated rates and operating budget. I'll now call upon Mayor Cisco, who will be presenting the 2026 Readoption Capital Budget, Water and Wastewater Budget, and associated rates and fees and operating budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Dodge. And I do appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Obviously, this year's budget is an extremely contentious process, which is why the gallery is full, and my joke to start things. I appreciate those councillors who are able to be here this evening online or in person. We're going through today the 2026 readoption budget. So this is started as the budget that we originally passed in 2023 for the 2024 to 2026 time period. There are some changes to this year's budget from what was readopted last year in 2020 for the 2025-26 year. So I will go over those changes. Some of those changes are things that council has asked for. Some of those things are items that I've identified that I think need to be put in place. And I was warned that there's a bit of a delay on the clicker, so I pressed it. There we go. And I think maybe the council coordinator kind of cheated there. But I appreciate it. The first report is with respect to the capital budget. This is informed by our asset management plan, which we get updates on a regular basis. I have only made a couple of small changes to the capital budget as it was presented by staff a couple of weeks ago. I've added a couple of items. The first one that you'll see there is $124,000 for the removal and the repair of baseball diamond backstops across the city. A number of months ago, I put forth a mayoral direction asking CRCS staff to go through what I have called stranded assets in the community. These are largely recreational assets that have been in place in the community, but over time, some of them have fallen into disrepair and they've kind of been forgotten. The baseball backstops were one of the biggest items, the most noticeable items. I'm sure we can all think of parks that we've driven through or passed in the community where there is a backstop in many cases in disrepair. We've identified, I believe, 15 of them, or I shouldn't say we. Our CRCS staff, led by the very capable Mr. Christie, has identified 15 of them, some of which are in need of repair, some of which need to be removed. And so the allocation there using the tax rate stabilization reserve is to allow for those diamond backstops to be removed. There is $50,000 for additional signage related to the public space use bylaw. This grew out of some of the comments that we heard from residents after the passage of the public space use bylaw, stating that there should be signs in our parks explaining in the similar way that we have signs up for other issues across the city. And so that money has been allocated. There's $120,000 to be able to continue the renovations that have taken place at George Teeler Field. This is the next phase of that with the addition of a deck with a covered roof past the left field fence. And then $500,000 for a compact storage solution at the museum. This is subject to a grant award and was something that council actually passed earlier in the year, and I will touch on that again when we talk about the operating budget. In terms of a net change, this is a net increase of $144,000 from 2025 to 2026, and is in line in large part with what we had passed previously in 2024. The water wastewater budget, I have not made any changes. This is based on the budget that was originally adopted on February 2nd, 2024. I have no proposed changes to these adopted rate budgets for 2026, and the rate increase will be the same as was adopted during the last readoption process. The operating budget, this one runs a couple more slides, so I will move through this as confidently as I can. For starters, these are the changes that were brought about by decisions of council over the course of the year. $349,900 for enforcement of the public space use bylaw. When we originally approved this, half of the cost of the public space use bylaw was to be borne by the tax rate stabilization reserve for 2026. The other half is on the levy. $25,000 would be on the operating budget for the museum compact storage solution. Again, this is subject to the grant award that staff have put out a grant application for. And then $166,000 is expected in increased revenue from the parking services report that we passed earlier this year. In terms of the changes that I have brought in over and above the changes the council asked for, the first is $250,000 in funding to support the completion of the Ontario Street Corridor Secondary Plan. The funding for this would come from the Civic Project Fund. I've had the chance to speak to some councillors about this, but I think we've noticed over the last couple of weeks there's been increased scrutiny once again on the property at 282, 285 Ontario Street. And a lot of questions have been asked about what the city can accomplish. I've been very clear, for the most part, this property it falls under provincial jurisdiction. A lot of the environmental concerns, well, all of the environmental concerns that residents have raised are things that are rightly dealt with by the MOECP. With that said, there is still something that City Council can do to try and make the conditions on the site better. The best lever that we have right now to influence the ultimate remediation of the site, which I think is what everybody is looking for, is to make an amendment to the official plan through a secondary plan exercise. That would see the site redesignated to mixed use from its current employment designation. It's only through residential development that this site is actually going to get fully cleaned up. The current designation under the official plan of employment, that would allow a potential buyer to come into town, purchase the property, and put new industrial buildings right on top of the ground as it exists today without any remediation. That is not what anybody in the community wants. And what I have said is it's in the city's best interest to get the site properly remediated and redeveloped for residential mixed use. The secondary plan is how the city can go about achieving that goal. And so I'm adding the $250,000 through single source procurement to try and expedite this process and get moving. As I said, the city has very limited levers that we can pull with respect to this property. This is the one which I think has the biggest impact. I try to reiterate this when I talk to residents. As an employment designation, it does not need to be cleaned up. But I think everybody in the community agrees we all want it to be cleaned up. We need to make this change so that anybody who's potentially purchasing the property recognizes the expectation from the community is a full remediation. Next on the list is a $500,000 allocation for value for money audits. This will be funded through the tax rate stabilization reserve. This came out of the conversation that council has had around the core services review, and the core service review led to the process that we're currently going through now, which is a value for money audit. The best practices and looking at what these types of audits cost in other communities, the upset limit of $500,000 for the allocation is what staff believes is necessary. We are going to the outside for these value for money audits, and so there is a cost associated with that, but it's important to get a new set of eyes looking at the numbers at the city, and so that's why we are allocating those dollars. This is a one-time cost, and so it's appropriate for it to come from the tax rate stabilization reserve. There's a $120,000 increase in city funding for the St. Catharines Public Library. That was identified by the library when they made their presentation to the Budget Standing Committee a couple of weeks ago. And there's $162,000 in new funding for a sponsorship supervisor to implement the sponsorship and revenue pilot program. This is also funded from the tax rate stabilization reserve. Some councillors may remember the report that we received with respect to a possible sponsorship and revenue program. I don't remember if it was this term of council, but I believe it was actually the last term of council, and I'm looking at Mr. Christie to quietly nod. Yes, so the last term of council, so not everybody was aware of this. We received a report with a number of ways that the city could garner more revenue from sponsorship, but there were staff resources that were necessary to be able to actually action the report. At the time, council made the decision not to do that. I believe our reserves are in a very healthy place right now, and it offers us the opportunity to examine this without impacting the levy and impacting taxpayers. And so I think we should be moving forward with a 2-year pilot program to identify if the capacity exists for enough return on investment that we make this a part of our staff complement in the future. But I think we have to run the pilot program first, and so that's why we are allocating that money from the tax rate stabilization reserve. Moving on and hoping that it clicks forward. Did it move forward? Oh, there we go. Wonderful. No, one too far. And we both pressed the button. See, there we go. The next is $500,000 for the winter control pilot program. This is something that we've discussed a great deal about this year. The money would be coming from the winter control reserve. The winter control reserve has a very healthy balance at this time, and so it was appropriate for the dollars to come from there. I know staff are currently in conversations on how to best action that pilot program. We've identified the difficulties that our snow clearing operations have had over the last couple of years, and staff are looking at how to rectify that. And so that's the best use of the winter control reserve, because as I said, it has a balance which is probably more than we need it to. So I'm going to be hopefully tasking the Standing Budget Committee in the new year with looking at our reserve policy to identify what our upset limits for some of these reserves is, because I think winter control is just about maxed out. But we will be taking that from the reserve. There is a $300,000 reduction in the tax levy transfer to the DC exemption reserve. This came about through conversation with staff and what staff felt was a conservative cut to be making in this situation. Similarly, the $115,000 reduction in the tax levy transfer to the Community Improvement Plan grant funding. In conversation with staff, they have felt that these are conservative cuts that are supportable. Additionally, there's a $66,000 reduction in the tax levy for debt charges. All of these numbers are reasonable reductions. I will say that there was an option to go farther. I try to be prudent when I put together my budget, and so that was as far as I was willing to go, but I don't think there's any need to tax residents for those additional dollars if those dollars aren't absolutely necessary. The next change that I've identified is a $261,000 one-time funding by the Tax Rate Stabilization Reserve to the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, and that'll be used to transition to a new funding model. Right now, the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre is receiving a certain amount, just north of $2 million in their levy support. Obviously, there are changes that have come to the Performing Arts Centre over the last year with respect to the tenants that are using it. And so this is intended as one-time transition funding with the understanding that the PAC board and its leadership are going to come back as a part of the 2027 budget process with a new funding model to continue operations in the way the community expects them to be continued, but at the current levy support. Obviously, some of the changes that have come about over the last year have had a significant impact. This gives the board and the leadership there time to be able to rework how things are done at the Performing Arts Centre, but ensure that the facility meets the needs of the community, both from an entertainment perspective and from providing venues for local operators to be able to put forth their cultural wares. The one thing that this does, it also ensures that the recital hall will be used in 2026 by community groups at affordable rates. That was one of the caveats that the board was quite happy to agree to. And so I look forward to them coming forward with a new plan in 2027, given that Brock will no longer be in the building. And then I believe this is the final slide of changes. And this change was something that was requested by council a couple of years ago, that we use the special tax mitigation reserve to reduce the tax impact on the median home. So this year we are allocating $1 million from that reserve to help reduce the tax impact on the median home. As I said, this was when the reserve was established, this was the expectation of council, and so we have done that this year. The remainder of the special tax mitigation reserve is to be used to offset staffing cost pressures resulting from the fire arbitration results. And so those dollars are set aside for that to smooth the impact of the fire arbitration award. So if we take a look at the summary of this year's readoption operating budget, you can see there the different inputs and reductions leads to an overall annual median home impact on city taxes of 1.87%. I want to be very clear to all those who are listening, all those who will read about this tomorrow, that is very much the city portion of the tax bill. Obviously, there are other elements that impact on the overall property tax bill for residents in the city of St. Catharines. I am going to provide an estimate of that, but specifically to the city side of things, the city portion of the tax bill has a 1.87% increase, and that equals about $33.36 on the average median home. I am going to give an estimate of what the total increase in the tax bill could be based on current information. I will remind council, this is an estimate only, as many parts of this potential tax bill have not been completed yet. A couple of things that I want to point out. This is based on the estimated 2025 assessment from MPAC, which won't be finalized until December, so that could change things. It's based on the 2025 tax ratios, which will be set by the region in early 2026. And I'm not sure if Ms. Douglas can nod or not, but I don't believe the tax ratios really move at all from year to year. Not usually. I don't think I've actually had a chance to vote on changing them yet at the region. This is based on an estimated regional waste levy as of on August 14th working budget presentation when the numbers were presented, the preliminary numbers were presented. This is also based on an estimated transit levy as of the October 9th working budget presentation. And finally, it's based on a regional tax levy estimate from the May 22nd budget planning meeting. So I want to caution, I'm trying to provide this information in the full context because I know councillors always have questions as to how the city taxes fit into the overall tax bill, but these are based on estimates, and I will say my expectation is that these numbers will come down on the regional side of things based on the conversations that we are having at the region currently. So if we take a look at the property tax bill, as mentioned, the city levy increase would be $33.36. The regional estimated levy property tax bill increase would be $190.57. The regional estimated special levy property tax increase would be another $29.07. And then finally, the education property tax increase, we're setting at zero, as the last couple of years have not seen increases, but the province hasn't released their 2026 education rates yet either. So the total all-in impact in St. Catharines, if these numbers were not to change, would be 5.52%. I will take great pains at this time to point out that of that 5.52%, the city, if the budget does not change, would only be responsible for 0.73% of that 5.52. And I will take this opportunity now to applaud my colleagues on council. We started this term in a very difficult financial position, and over the last 2 years and now into this year, the third year, our multi-year budget has provided a much greater cost certainty for the residents of St. Catharines with respect to the city costs. And I think that that's important to point out. We've held downward pressure on taxes as best we can and continued to deliver the services that residents expect and demand on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis, and we've done a very good job of it. So in terms of the next steps, and this should say the 2026 budget readoption process, I believe November 12th, which is next Wednesday, is when amendments from council need to be submitted. November 19th is the first budget meeting. The November 20th meeting will be the second date for amendments, should business not, and so the asterisk there should be on the next meeting, that's my apologies. And November 25th would be the end of the 30-day amendment period. As a reminder, because this question gets asked on a regular basis, I really have no interest in vetoing anything that comes forward from council. It's my opinion that in general, if council decides that they want to make changes to the budget, I'm comfortable with that, so long as it's a majority vote and it moves forward. With that said, I will utilize the veto. I have not had to at this point. I've been given no reason to use a veto in this strong mayor process over the last couple of years. I don't expect I will have to this year either. But if I were to use a veto, it would be for one of the following problems. There's an amendment that could harm residents or the services that they depend on, an amendment that could harm the position of the city, amendments that are not submitted under the appropriate deadlines, amendments that are contrary to previous council decisions, amendments that are too broad or too vague, or amendments that would raise the levy by an unacceptable amount or without an increase in service levels. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions that councillors may have with respect to my 2026 readoption budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Chair. As far as the capital budget was concerned, you indicated that there'd be some baseball backstops repaired, which is great, but removed, which I'm concerned about. Are they going to be replaced, or are we going to transition those ball diamonds into parkland or soccer fields?
In those areas where they're being removed, they've already been transitioned. There are no lines, there is no field. It is simply a backstop sitting in the middle of a very large green field.
So the
They used to be. And that was one of the things, and I will say I hope this has been a theme over the last couple of years. I'm very much in favor of the city being responsible for the things that we're responsible for, not taking on outside responsibilities. But in those places where we have infrastructure, we have to take responsibility for it, and we have to maintain it properly, or we have to make decisions about moving on from that infrastructure. So I think that's important to understand. I will say there are other areas of the city, there are other recreational amenities that I think we have to make similar decisions on, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that budget dollars are not unlimited. And so, we have a list, and it's something that we're going to be tasking CRCS with over the course of the next year to come up with a plan on how we can either remove those amenities that council and the community have decided are no longer necessary, or improve them and bring them up to the standard that I think residents demand. We've had very, very good response from those parts of the community where we've gone in, and CRCS has done their work along with other departments to rebuild the park infrastructure. I'll use the Elma Street Park as a perfect example. I've had residents contact my office and tell me how thrilled they are to have kids making happy noises in the park, playing basketball or whatever else, because what was there previously was not used. That's not the point of that recreational infrastructure. So we're going to take responsibility for what we own and make decisions about it, and this is step one from that stranded asset report.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor McPherson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. Thank you for great to see the investment in the Ontario Street corridor secondary plan. With that, do you have a timeline for completion on that?
1 year.
1 year, okay. That's great.
Which I think is pushing things. In my conversation with planning staff, they've said that's about as fast, and we need an expedited process to be able to do that. But I think, unfortunately, I hate to say the word wasted, but I think we've wasted too much time. Mm-hmm. We have, sort of started and stopped, and that has put a halt to, the community input. We went to a lot of trouble to make sure that the community had an opportunity to provide input, and they haven't had that chance yet. By expediting this process and getting it going, we can give the community their chance to have a say on what that site should look like. And we have the ability then to a certain extent, dictate terms on what goes on that site. As I said, I do not want to see an industrial building, heavy industrial or light industrial, put on that site with no remediation effort. This is our way to control what happens to that site, and I think residents expect us to control it by making sure it actually gets cleaned up.
Fantastic. And just the second question around the Performing Arts Center. Will there be additional, I know that you've said that the process for them coming back to us would be for their 2027 budget. What are your thoughts, I guess, really on how are they going to ensure that the community groups are used? Will there be checks and balances when it comes to ensuring that community groups are getting in there? Because we've heard from a lot of community groups already that it's beyond their
So I've had very good
reach.
I've had very good conversations with the board chair, and I've made it very clear that this is a priority for council because it's a priority for the cultural community. I think a lot of people, when this facility was built, had an expectation of how much community use would actually be able to work through the facility. Now, understanding that it was built in a very specific way with very specific facilities for very specific tenants, that wasn't able to happen the way I think the community envisioned it over the last 10 years. However, circumstances changed, and we now have a space that we know is not going to be used by the originally intended tenant. Then let's find a way to get those community groups into that space. Is it the perfect space for the type of art that they're doing? Maybe it's not perfect, but it's a space that can accommodate and can allow them to show off the art that they're doing to the broader community. So as I said, I've had very good conversations with Mark Steinman, who's the board chair. Mm-hmm. He understands exactly where we're coming from, and I think is adamant that that's going to take place. And I have a lot of faith in his leadership to be able to move that forward over the coming year. With respect to the new financial plan, mm-hmm. he and I have also had very good conversations, and he understands the viewpoint of this council that the current levy allocation is the current levy allocation. And, accounting for inflation, which I think is fair, they have to live within those means. The reality is that when it comes to cultural spending in the city of St. Catharines, we punch above our weight in this community as compared to others. We spend more on cultural pursuits than a lot of other comparably sized municipalities. I don't think we have more money to spend. And so I have faith in Mr. Steinman and his board that they are going to make sure what comes forward meets the criteria that we've set down, because I've told him I don't think there's another option. Yeah.
Right. Would they be coming back, just last question, will they be coming back at some point to kind of give us an update on where they are with the community group?
That's my expectation. I had indicated the council's going to want to know what that plan looks like, so will happily follow up with them to make sure there is an expectation that something comes forward, and not halfway through the year with a plan, but in December or January with a plan for what this looks like, to make sure that those groups are able to start accessing that space as soon as possible.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Stevens?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, please. I know our tax rate stabilization reserve, just so everybody kind of understands it, and I just want to clarify myself too. A lot of times when we take the money out of that, it's for a one-off. It's if something special came up between budgets as well, and in order not to increase our tax rate is, that's where that money comes from. That's correct, right, Mr. Mayor?
That was the intention when it was established, that it shouldn't be used for ongoing expenses, but for one-time expenses, smaller one-time capital projects.
And just how much money do we usually, is that reserve usually kept at? Like, it just seems like we take it from there a lot of times, it seems, throughout the year for different things. And it's in a good spot, I guess, is it?
It's in a very good spot. I may look back to the Director of Finance, but I want to say its current unallocated balance before this budget is 7.2? 7.2 million?
It's just around 7 million.
7 million, okay. I was giving myself $200,000 worth of credit. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I just wanted to reiterate what that was for, because people might hear throughout the year all the time that we're taking 100 out of here, 50 out of here for something special. It comes out of there, so I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
No, Councillor, and I appreciate the clarification, and I think it's important for people to understand. That was something that was put in place a couple of terms of council ago. I can't remember if it might have been the 18 to 22 term, but very handsome budget chair of the day put that in place. And I think it's been good. It's allowed us to weather a couple of storms. Obviously, we had increased costs over the last couple of years in a couple of different areas, and it's allowed us to be able to smooth out some of the bumps that come along with municipal budgeting. And the reserve has grown slowly but steadily, and it's provided us with a little bit of space to be able to try certain things. And I'll use the sponsorship supervisor position. That's an example of something that I think everybody on council recognizes the value if that position works. If that position can bring in more than the position costs, and that's a net benefit to the community, it's more revenue being brought in for the city to be able to do more things, specifically in recreation areas. But it's a risk to put that on the levy, and it creates a structural position when it's put on the levy where it's unlikely, if the position doesn't get used, that money falls off the levy. It gets reallocated somewhere else. By taking the money out of the reserve, council has to make a very clear decision after the 2-year pilot project is over, whether it makes sense to continue it, and if it does, shift it to the levy at that time, because the dollars that are accrued from sponsorship would be able to offset that. But I appreciate the question. It's a good question about the reserve.
Yep. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I want to make a motion to go in camera to speak about identifiable individuals. And I think that the best way to do it is in camera.
Okay. So, Councillor Townsend, are you moving that we go in camera?
Yes, moving to go in camera.
Okay. So, can I have a show of hands to move in camera? Okay, we'll be moving in camera. Thank you. Council is now back in session, and Councillor Townsend, do you have any other questions of the mayor at this time?
No, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the mayor for providing some further context. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Mako?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the mayor and the operating budget. I'm wondering if you could expand a bit on the staffing for the public space use bylaw. I know that was one of the more contentious issues we've discussed the past 6 months, and no one's wanting that to be a permanent fixture here at the city. So just wondering if the staffing positions, are they going to be temporary contract positions, or are they potentially going to be permanent positions for something we hope is not a permanent issue the city's dealing with? So maybe just talk a bit about the staffing model and what your vision is there.
So some of them are permanent positions. I'm going to look to, I'm not sure if maybe the CAO wants to provide some context, because they've fitted out all of the staffing positions, but just discuss how those staff are being used now, perhaps, and where they will be going in the future if the problems abate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor. Essentially, I believe what the mayor had included in the budget was to sort of fill the financial gap. But in terms of the staff that have been allocated to the public space bylaw, they are bylaw enforcement staff. They are hired permanently. The intent is, you know, as we are able to improve these situations in society, we will still have a need for bylaw enforcement, and the intent would be to, you know, have them focus in other areas specifically that we know we have shortfalls in on the bylaw enforcement side of the equation. So the intent is not, as you know, to hopefully this is a short-term issue that we have to deal with, but we do have a need for the permanent bylaw enforcement.
Thank you. I think that's what I was looking for, just not that they were essentially only hired to do this role, that they could be cross-trained, in other words, to deal with other bylaw issues, because we did identify a need for more bylaw enforcement more generally during our discussions this year.
That's correct. I mean, there are laborer positions as well. And I mean, in this particular case, they're specifically assigned to work with staff in the enforcement of the public space use bylaw. But I mean, they're general laborer positions, so they can be moved to other areas as the need arises, or lack of need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mako. And I see no further questions, but I do have a question that I'd like to ask of the mayor, and it's in regards to our winter controls pilot project. I know that we're working on it, and there's lots of wheels turning to make this happen, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that you can share with us at this time about what changes we're looking to see when this starts to come forward.
I'm going to throw this one over to the CAO, because he has direct line of sight as he's been involved with the building out of the winter control pilot program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, essentially what we're looking at for the pilot is having more staff on more shifts throughout the winter season. Essentially what we've done up to this point, we did have a pilot project 10 plus years ago, where we have an overnight shift at Lake Street that is intended to manage a lot of the winter control. And the pilot project allowed us to sort of backfill the staff, because they would come in from a day shift and then move to the night, but we didn't backfill the day shifts. So we were always running, up to this point, we've been running with fewer day shift employees. This pilot project is, it's a partnership and a discussion we've been having with the union to bring on seasonal employees to be able to fill those gaps. So we'll essentially have 3 shifts, 3 crews, 24/7 over the winter months, to allow us to get into all of the roads, both the main arterials, but more importantly, I think for a lot of the challenges that we faced last year and other heavy snow years, getting into the secondaries, the cul-de-sacs, earlier than what we've been able to do. So this is really an attempt for us to be able to look at and staff appropriately to have some better service in the across all roads into the city. If the pilot proves, successful and it works, then we'll be coming back with a more permanent solution. But this is really our attempt to look at it and deal with, the actual seasonality and being able to manage it. So the hope is that this will solve some of the challenges that we've had. We're also complementing this with the review that's currently being undertaken on our winter control operations and routing, the types of equipment that we have, the relationship we have with the region and on our winter and snow removal programs. So it's intended to allow us both to do the study work, but also more importantly, to actually have the bodies in place to get to the roads as quickly, as effectively as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Oakes, for that information. I'm sure that the residents of St. Catharines are looking forward to that in this upcoming season. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to say thank you to council for the questions. And as always, if there are any further questions, happy to sit down with any members of council who may like to inquire any further clarification on the thought process behind the budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So at this time, can I get a motion to receive the presentation from the mayor and also receive the in-camera presentation that we received a few moments ago? Councillor Phillips, Councillor Ratzlaff. Can I have a show of hands in favor? Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. So now we go to a call of notice of motion to amend the budgets at the meetings of November 19th, 2025. And a notice of motion is not required to bring forward a budget amendment, but as a reminder, budget amendments must be submitted to the clerk's office by Wednesday, November 12th at 4 p.m. And also at this time, is there anybody who has any requests for information about the budget that might not be here this evening? Okay, that's great. So we did have our closed session, but we've already taken care of that. And so now we're moving on to the bylaws. Can I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor McPherson, Councillor Miller. Show of hands, please. Anyone opposed? And that's carried. And then our last that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its budget meeting held on the 5th day of November, one reading with respect to the confirming the proceedings of meeting held November 5th, and that it be signed and executed by the chair and the deputy clerk. And now we have an adjournment motion. Can I have a motion to Councillor McPherson and Councillor Phillips? All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you.